Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The hot, sticky air clung to Ed Green's skin as he stood on the wooden platform, facing a small crowd of loyal supporters. They had gathered in a remote part of the city, far from the eyes of government agents, in a place where the people still had hope. His heart pounded, but it wasn't to nerves, it was determination. The wind carried the scent of decay from the nearby fields, once lush and fertile, now wasteland poisoned by government-run factories. Aiden knew the truth, but it wasn't true enough to know it. He had to expose it. I stand before you today, not as a politician, but as one of you, a citizen, who refuses to watch. As our land is destroyed, our people silenced, Aiden began, his voice steady despite the weight of his words. The faces in the crowd reflected the quiet desperation of a population too long oppressed. The so-called elections coming up are nothing but a facade. Minister Zongkang and the Communist Party have tightened their grip on this nation, and every vote is another link in the chain they've all wrapped around us. A few murmurs rose from the audience. The truth wasn't too easy to hear, but Aiden could feel their frustration bubbling just beneath the surface. He locked eyes with Sophia Zagu, standing at the edge of the gathering, her camera capturing every moment. She gave him a subtle nod. It was time to push forward. I've been digging deeper, and what we've found is worse than we imagined. The party is not just ignoring the environmental crisis, they're re-accelerating it. They're intentionally driving our resources into the ground, controlling the population through fear and environmental collapse. And if we don't do it now, they will take everything. A hush fell over the crowd. Aiden paused, his chest heaving with the enormity of what he was saying. He glanced again at Sophia. She was ready. They'd been working in secret for months, investigating the dark underbelly of the regime, risking their lives at every turn. And now, with the election just weeks away, they were about to make their findings public. The stakes couldn't be higher. After the rally, Sophia joined Aiden as they made their way to the small car parked discreetly behind a row of trees. Her short, black hair fluttered in the breeze, her eyes sharp and focused. The party won't let this go unnoticed, she said quietly, glancing around as they walked. We were going to need more than a speech to bring them down? Aiden nodded. I know, but the people need to understand what's happening. We can just keep this in the shadows. They need to see the evidence, and we need to get it to them before the party shuts us down. They drove through the crumbling outskirts of the city in silence, the weight of their mission pressing down on them. The landscape was a testament to the party's corruption. Factories belched toxic fumes into the sky, fields lay fallow, their soil poisoned beyond repair. Entire communities had been uprooted, displaced by the party's silent, relentless pursuit of control. It was hard to believe that just a few decades ago, this country had been a beacon of hope for progress and prosperity. As they approached the safe house, a downstairs phone buzzed a message from Isaac Lin, the whistleblower. It was short and cryptic. Tomorrow, midnight. Same place. Aiden showed Sophia the screen. It's happening. Sophia exhaled slowly. Isaac is risking everything to get us this information. We can fail him. Isaac Lane had once been a rising star within the Communist Party, its Department of Population Control, but his conscience had gotten the better of him. He'd have seen too much, and now he was their key to exposing the party's darkest secret. But every meeting with Isaac was fraught with danger. If the government found out what he was doing, it would mean certain death, not just for him, but for all of them. The next night, Aiden and Sophia made their way to the meeting point, a derelict factory on the outskirts of the city. The air was thick with tension as they waited in the shadows, the only sound the distant hum of machinery. Finally, Isaac emerged from the darkness, his face gaunt and pale, his eyes darting nervously. You weren't followed? He asked, his voice low. No, Aiden replied. Did you get it? Isaac nodded, pulling a small data chip from his coat pocket. Everything, the environmental destruction, the population control programs, the fake election. It's all here, but there's sense more. The party isn't just destroying the environment for profit. They were doing it to control the population. They want to create a crisis so severe that the people have no choice but to rely on them for survival. Aiden felt a cold wave of dread wash over him. They were manufacturing a disaster. Isaac nodded grimly, and they were close to finishing it. If they succeed, there will be no way out. They'll have total control. Sophia took the chip, her face set in determination. We need to get this out to the people now. But as they turned to leave, a sudden noise stopped them in their track. The sharp click of a gun being cocked echoed through the dark factory. Aiden's heart raced as he spun around, his eyes searching the shadows. 4 figures stepped into the dim light, armed and dressed in the unmistakable uniforms of the party, secret police. "You're under arrest," one of the officers growled, his voice cold and devoid of emotion, "for crimes against the state." Time seemed to slow as Aiden's mind raced. There was no way out. They were trapped, but they couldn't let the party get their hands on that data chip. It was their only chance to expose the truth. Without thinking, Aiden lunged at the nearest officer, grabbing for his gun. The 2 men grappled in the darkness, the sound of grunts and scuffling filling the air. Sophia and Isaac ducked behind a nearby crate, desperately trying to stay out of the line of fire. A shot rang out, and for a brief, terrifying moment, Aiden thought it was over. But the officer's aim had been off, and Aiden managed to wrestle the gun from his hands, delivering a hard punch to the man's jaw. He collapsed to the ground, unconscious. "Run," Aiden shouted to Sophia and Isaac as he turned to face the other officer. They bolted for the door, the sound of gunfire ringing in their ears as they fled into the night. Aiden's breath came in ragged gasps as they ran, his mind racing with fear and adrenaline. They had the evidence, but now the party knew they were close, and they wouldn't stop until they were dead. By the time they reached the safe house, Aiden's entire body ached from the fight, but they had made it for now. They were safe. Sophia wasted no time. She plugged the data chip into her laptop and began the process of uploading the files to a secure network. "This has to go public now," she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard, "before the party can stop us." But even as the files began to upload, Aiden knew that their battle was far from over. They had the truth, but they were fighting a machine that had been built to suppress it, and now they were in its crosshairs. "We need to move fast," Aiden said, pacing the room. "They'll be coming for us." Sophia nodded, her expression grim. "We need to get this out before they can silence us." But as the minutes ticked by, a deep sense of unease settled over Aiden. The truth was out there now, but would it be enough? Would the people rise up, or would the party's iron grip tighten even further? As the first rays of dawn began to break through the window, Aiden knew one thing for certain: there was no turning back now. The truth was out there, and the fight for freedom had only just begun. Aiden barely had time to catch his breath as the sun rose, casting a pale light over the safe house. The weight of what they had done hung in the air, like the morning mist. Sophia was still bent over her laptop, her face lit by the glow of the screen. The files were being transmitted, but they both knew the party's sun reach was long, and it wouldn't be long before their enemies found them again. "We need to get out of here," Aiden said, his voice tight with urgency. His body was still humming with adrenaline, every muscle tensed as if expecting the door to burst open at any moment. Sophia did look up, but she nodded. "Just a few more minutes. We have to make sure the files are fully uploaded if anything happens." The door creaked open, and Aiden's heart skipped a beat, his hand instinctively reaching for the gun they had taken from the officer the night before. But it was only Isaac, looking pale and shaken, his eyes darting around the room like a hunted animal. "They were coming," Isaac said breathlessly. "I saw them on my way back. They were sweeping the area. We don't have much time." Aiden swore under his breath. "Sophia, we need to go now." She finally looked up, her expression grim. "It's soon done," she said, slamming the laptop shut. "But they were going to come after everyone who sees this. The public isn't ready for this kind of truth. It's going to shake the foundation of everything they believe." And Aiden knew she was right. The evidence they had uncovered wasn't just damning, it was earth-shattering. The party's carefully constructed image would crumble, and with it the trust of millions of people. But it would also make them the most wanted people in the country. "We need to split up," Aiden said, his mind racing as he tried to come up with a plan. "They'll expect us to stay together. If we separate it'll be harder for them to track all of us." Isaac looked terrified at the suggestion, but he nodded. "What about you two? What's your plan?" Aiden met Sophia's gaze. They had been partners in this fight for so long that words were almost unnecessary. They both knew the risks, knew that there might not be a way out this time, but there was no turning back. "We'll head to the coast," Aiden said after a beat. "There's some resistance cell near the old dock. They can get us out of the city, maybe even the country, if we were lucky." Sophia stood, her face set with determination. "Let's move." They gathered what little they had, shoving laptops, hard drives, and weapons into bags. Isaac hesitated by the door, his hand shaking as he gripped the knob. If they catch me, they won't, Aiden said firmly. You've done more than enough, Isaac. You gave us the truth now. It's up to us to make sure it gets out. Isaac gave a short, tense nod and slipped out into the early morning light. Aiden and Sophia followed moments later, moving quickly and quietly through the back alleys, keeping to the shadows. Every sound made Aiden, as pulse quickened, every footstep feeling like the approach of death. The party. Secret police were everywhere, and the city was their hunting ground. The sun was fully up by the time they reached the edge of the industrial district. The old docks lay ahead, a sprawling complex of rusting cranes and crumbling warehouses that had been abandoned years ago when the government shifted focus to automated production. The resistance used it as a base, hidden in plain sight. Aiden's stomach churned as they approached the main gate. He had expected to feel some relief upon reaching the docks, but instead there was only a gnawing sense of unease. Something wasn't right. Wait, Sophia said. Stopping abruptly, she crouched down behind a stack of shipping containers, pulling Aiden down with her. Look. Aiden followed her gaze and felt his blood run cold. The docks were crawling with soldiers, all in the unmistakable uniform of the party. Secret police. They moved in tight formations, sweeping the area with military precision. The resistance had been compromised. Sophia cursed under her breath. They knew we were coming. We've walked right into a trap. We need to find another way. Aiden whispered. His mind raced as he scanned the area for any possible escape route. There was no way they could take on that many soldiers, and if the resistance was gone, their last chance of getting out of the city had vanished with it. Before he could say anything more, a loud crack echoed through the air. Aiden whipped around just in time to see a bullet ricochet off the metal container beside them. They were under fire. Run, Sophia shouted, grabbing Aiden's arm and pulling him toward a narrow alley between two warehouses. Bullets whizzed past them as they sprinted, the sound of boots pounding against concrete growing louder behind them. They burst into the alley, panting and gasping for breath, but there was no time to stop. The soldiers were gaining on them, and the city's labyrinth of alleys and abandoned buildings was their only hope of losing them. Aiden's lungs burned as they ran, his legs aching with the effort. He could hear Sophia struggling beside him, her breath coming in ragged gasps. They were both running on empty, but there was no other option. Stopping meant death. They rounded a corner, and suddenly the world seemed to tilt beneath Aiden's feet. A wave of dizziness hit him like a freight train, and he stumbled, his vision blurring. He tried to keep moving, but his body refused to cooperate. He collapsed against a wall, gasping for air, his chest heaving. Sophia skidded to a stop beside him, her face pale with exhaustion. Come on, Aiden, she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. We can stop now. But Aiden couldn't move. His body had reached its limit, and all he could do was sit there, his back pressed against the cold brick wall, as the sound of approaching footsteps grew closer. I am sorry, he whispered, his voice thick with regret. I can't. But before he could finish, the footsteps stopped. A moment of eerie silence hung in the air, and then the sound of a slow, deliberate clap echoed through the alley. Well, a voice said, dripping with amusement. I have to admit, I am impressed you've caused quite a bit of trouble for us. Aiden looked up, his heart sinking as he saw the figure standing at the mouth of the alley ministers of air. The man's face was as cold and emotionless as ever, but there was a glint of satisfaction in his eye. He took a few steps forward, his polished boots clicking against the pavement, his hands clasped behind his back. I must commend your efforts, Zhang said, his voice smooth and calculated. You've been a thorn in our side for quite some time, but all good things must come to an end. Sophia stepped in front of Aiden, her body trembling with exhaustion, but her eyes blazing with defiance. You can kill us, she said, her voice shaking, but you can't kill the truth. The Sang raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. Of the truth, he laughed, a cold, hollow sound. You're still clinging to that, are you? The truth is irrelevant, my dear. The people believe what I tell them to believe, and as for your little rebellion, well, let's just say it will be dealt with swiftly. Aiden tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't support him. He was helpless, watching as Oran's soldiers closed in around them, their guns trained on his chest. This was the end. But just as Orang opened his mouth to deliver the final blow, a deafening explosion rocked the alley. The ground shook beneath them, and the air filled with the sound of shattering glass and collapsing metal.
Non-soundes Donnerschön one in.
Before he could finish, a second explosion ripped through the docks, sending debris flying in all directions. Aiden could barely hear over the roar of destruction, but he saw the soldiers scatter, their formation breaking in the chaos. In the confusion, Sophia grabbed Aiden's arm and pulled him to his feet. "Now's our chance," she shouted over the noise. "Come on." They stumbled through the smoke and debris, half blinded by the dust and flames, but they kept moving. The explosions had bought them time, but Aiden knew it wouldn't last. They had to get out of the city now. As they made their way through the burning wreckage of the docks, Aiden's thoughts raced. The resistance wasn't all dead. They had struck back, and they had saved them, but for how long? The truth was out, but the fight was far from over.